Internal Security Act of 1950. Now, did we realize that we maybe didn't get all the communist organizations that were in the country found? So what the Internal Security Act did is it did two things. One, it required that any communist organization that was based in the United States had to submit their membership lists to the Office of the Attorney General. So if you were running a communist organization in the United States, by law, you needed to submit your membership lists, all the members of your organization, to the Attorney General. So if Soraya Durant's running the Durant communist regime in the United States and you are all members of that, then she would be required by law to submit to the Attorney General's office all of your names. Okay? Would they come after you if she submitted those names? No, as long as you weren't doing things that were detrimental to the country. Yeah? Who would? But it just... What? To the Attorney General, yeah. Now, that's the first thing the law did, that all communist organizations had to submit their membership list to the Office of the Attorney General. Not only did they have to do that, they had to release their financial operations to the Attorney General.
Yeah. So why would they do it?
I'm not sure. I'm not really sure why they would. I think that they just didn't think they could get them all. You'll be surprised at what we have going here. It gets even crazier. Let's ask me that question again when we get through McCarthyism. Okay, and that's the next test material. You ever heard of Eugene or you ever heard of Joseph McCarthy? What's that? What? I'm missing something, but anyway, we'll move on. So they had to also, Soraya would have to give the Attorney General the financial operations of her organization, how much money they had in their coffer, what they had spent their money for, what they're doing, etc. And I assume that if you turned those things in, then you would be watched quite specifically, but if you did something wrong, they would probably act on it. But we had a little bit of a communist paranoia in this country. But we didn't really have time to worry about it this time. It's going to be worried about during the Eisenhower administration because we have a conflict in Korea that we're going to have to deal with. And we'll start that and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Tomrup. So we'll get kind of a start on conflict in Korea. Yes?
Is this when the Red Scare happened or was that Eisenhower?
More Eisenhower, more Kennedy. I mean, the communism, as we get into the Cold War, this is a situation where we were not going to tolerate communism. And I'll kind of explain, you'll understand it. But the Cold War and the Red Scare really started in the 50s when Russia sent up Sputnik 1 and Sputnik 2, and we're going, oh my God, if they can send those up into space, they can send up nuclear. I mean, that was the Red Scare, but we'll get into that next test. Well, let's talk about this conflict in Korea because it's important. After the Japanese surrendered in 1945 that ended World War II, the country of Korea was divided. That was part of the agreement after the surrender. And the northern part of Korea, or North Korea, would be ruled by a communist leader, and their military was very heavily armed at the time. So when they split up things, so to speak, after World War II in Asia, North Korea and South Korea were split. The country was split. North Korea would be ruled by a communist leader, and it just so happened that their military was very, very heavily armed. Okay? South Korea then would be ruled by a non-communist leader, and they had a military that was very, very unprepared at the time. So that's kind of what the situation looked like in Korea after World War II. Again, North Korea would be ruled by a communist leader, and their military ended up being very heavily armed, and the South Koreans will be ruled by a non-communist leader, and their military was very unprepared. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what went on. North Korean leaders, because they knew South Korea had a weak military, made the decision that we'll just overtake South Korea and we'll force communism into the entire country. That's what they were planning on doing. That's the decision they made. So North Korean leaders are thinking back saying, well, we don't really like this arrangement much. If we're one country, they're kind of weak militarily. We'll just go down and take over the whole thing. We'll just all be communists. Well, on June 25th of 1950, June 25th of 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea. On June 25th, 1950. North Korea invaded South Korea. And this was very, very unpopular in the United States because the United States didn't want to see another country fall to communism. Well, President Truman was determined that he wasn't going to let South Korea fall to communism, so he expressed his concern to the United Nations, okay, and stated to the United Nations, hey, this isn't right. We should not allow this communist bully to take over a non-communist country simply because their military is not prepared. Now, who else? What's the big communist country at this time? Russia. Well, luckily for Truman, the Soviet Union was upset at the United Nations at the time, so they were boycotting the United Nations. Okay? And obviously, would Russia be in support of North Korea's actions? Well, sure they would. So at the time, the Soviet Union was boycotting the United Nations, and the Soviet Union was very much in support of the communist aggression by North Korea against South Korea. Great. Perfect. Well, because of the ill feelings on behalf of the United Nations towards Russia, Truman received the support that he needed to try to put a halt to this advance through the United Nations. So what he's going to do is he's not going to take this on as the United States. He's going to make this a United Nations issue. Okay? The United Nations is going to stop this communist aggression, not just the United States. So because Truman received strong support from the United Nations, the war in Korea that we're going to talk about would be fought under UN command, United Nations command. Okay? Wasn't the United States versus Korea, it's going to be the United Nations versus North Korea. So who would contribute supplies and troops to the war effort if we do it under UN command? Many countries, all the UN countries, so it would not be a United States complete war effort. Now, think about history, because when we say this is the Korean War, are we really correct? Is this really considered a war? How does something become a war? Yeah, in the United States, if you're going to have a war, the United States Congress has to vote on a declaration of war. Keep in mind in Korea, since this was fought under UN command, there was no declaration of war by anyone. And so you couldn't call this the Korean War. We called it the Korean conflict. And it actually was referred to in history as a police action. So it's not a war, it's a Korean conflict or the Korean police action. Now what do you think police action means? It's like the police are making sure things are happening. It's going to be, this whole thing's going to be policed by the United Nations. There's no country declaring war on another country. So when you really think about the Korean War, it really wasn't an official war because nobody declared war on anyone. It was fought, the United Nations and the countries that belong to the United Nations against North Korea. Okay, we'll tell you how we kicked butt and took names early in this thing and then how we got greedy. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Comra for about 10-15 minutes. But I want you to know that I believe that the swimmers are going to be leaving on Thursday night, but the volleyball probably missed. We are going to lecture tomorrow, volleyball girls, but we will not lecture Friday. We're going to show a biography on Harry Truman. No school Friday. Well, that makes it even easier. So we will lecture tomorrow, and I guess we're not worried about that. We'll lecture tomorrow. You guys get on it. Then we're going to have what on? We're going to kind of finish this up, and what do you think we're going to have on Monday?
All of them will be here. Yeah, we don't play till Friday.
Oh, great. Okay, well, perfect. Well, what are we going to have? A review on Monday, test Tuesday. That's kind of what we're looking at. Then we're moving on to Eisenhower, and we're going to slip through that, and then we're going to be where? Kennedy. Okay. All right. They quit naming the show. All right. I want you to speak freely about how bad you're treated in here. So I'm going to my office, and he's all yours.
The chairman of the board called me just now, so I'll have to run.